Welcome to the Restoring Our City podcast. My name is Jobin, and we are excited to bring you another episode where we have candid conversations on today's topics to help connect our community. And in this special episode, our guest is Jacqueline Marciante, who is the owner of Marciante and Company, which is a men and women's leather shoe company out of Dallas, Texas. And I love their tagline, which says, "We desire to add value to the community around us and the people within it." And they are totally doing that out of Dallas, Texas. And Jacqueline speaks a lot about leadership and specifically about how leaders adapt to change and what success really looks like, especially in challenging circumstances like this pandemic that we're in. And so you do not want to miss this episode. And if you find this content encouraging, consider subscribing. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can watch the full episodes on YouTube as well, and engage with us on our social media channels. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and you can find all that information at restoringourcity.org. Thanks for listening. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Restoring Our City podcast. My name's Jobin. I'm super excited to bring an old friend and definitely a leader in our community, Jacqueline Marciante, who is the owner of Marciante and Company. And she is on with us, hailing from Dallas, Texas. How are you doing today, Jacqueline?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Oh, of course. Of course. No, I appreciate you being on. And we've known each other for a while. I know we met way back when we used to go to those Catalyst conferences that just dealt with leadership. And so one of the first people I thought of, to have on the podcast was you. And you're obviously doing some great work in the community. So I think it would be really great to have you on. So Jackie, if I can call you Jackie on the podcast.
For sure.
Jackie, how's Dallas? I know you guys briefly went through a blizzard, which is crazy. How's everything going out there?
Everything is good right now. I feel like it was a scary time just for Dallas in general, because something like that hasn't happened here. And I think people were, freaking out that, we weren't going to have power for however long. Sometimes people were saying it was going to be a week, and then it turned into 2 weeks and then 3 weeks, and none of us knew what to expect. But, I think for a lot of people, it was pretty crazy because they didn't have like water, heat, and some people lost power for 2 weeks. And some people still don't even have clean water. So
wow,
it was just an insane time. I don't think none of us expected it to be as crazy as it was. And I think people were trying to figure it out once it happened, but I think at that time it was too late to try to figure it out. So, but right now I think, everything's going back to normal. People have power. I still think some places are trying to find clean water, but I think for the most part, we're just getting back to normal and routine. It was a little scary for Matt and I because we weren't even able to get to the shop at the time because everything was iced over. But all of our customers were pretty understanding. So we were like,
oh, that's good.
We're from Dallas, so
it's not like Chicago. Right. There's not salt trucks every 30 minutes or something. So
no. But it was a pretty crazy and scary time, but luckily, most of our friends and family were all good. So we're thankful for that. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are safe, and it's obviously definitely a scary situation. People lost their lives, and it's definitely unfortunate. So glad you guys are safe. But we're excited to have you on, and we've been just talking about leadership throughout this podcast. And so I really wanted our listeners to kind of get to know you. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to this point of starting your own company.
For me, I've always loved like fashion, and I've always loved putting things together at such a young age. And, before I met Matt, I always wanted to do something in the fashion industry. I just felt like at the time there wasn't a lot of people doing it around me. So I just didn't know what to expect or how to go about it. And, I think within our community, it wasn't even a thing to be in the fashion industry or to pursue something like that. And I just didn't know who to turn to at the time to really study it and then do a little bit more research and figure out like, how can I do something in this industry. And I just didn't really have anyone around me to, like, encouraging me to go for it. So
Yeah.
I just kind of put that in the back of my mind, like, maybe I will do it at some point in my life. But just didn't think anything of it. And then fast forward to meeting Matt when we were dating, we both like loved fashion. At one point, he had like 50 pairs of shoes.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was kind of like, you have more shoes than me. And the light bulb kind of just clicked because he knew I was really into design and fashion, and he loved like the shoe industry. So it seemed like a natural choice. We both wanted to do something creative together. And we were kind of like, why not just do this? So we knew there was like a huge gap between high quality, but very expensive shoes, and then low cost, low quality shoes. So for us, we wanted to create something closer to the high end quality, but at a fraction of the cost. So we were just trying to figure out, how can we do that? And luckily, like his dad has been in the fashion industry in leather for the last like 30 years. So he had introduced us to some factories in Leon, Mexico. That's where we usually fly into, and we design our shoes, bags, and a lot of our accessories there. And then literally once we started meeting people, building relationships, we came up with a design. Everything like went super fast,
Wow.
We like literally started talking about it at the end of 2016. Matt had flown to Mexico in March of 2017. And then we created a logo and we launched a Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding platform, in July, and then kicked off our online store in September of 2017.
Wow. So from concept to like launch, wow, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was really fast. And I felt like we always look back and I'm like, early 2017, I can't even tell you all of the details because everything was just moving super quickly. And, we had the vision for it. So once the pieces started coming together, we were like, why not just launch it? And, at the time, launching something on Kickstarter is a risk. And then you're putting your product in front of an audience and figuring out if they like something. And it was a success, and then we turned it into an online store in September. So
wow,
it was
that's
awesome.
amazing. That's so cool. It shows that you like, obviously you mentioned having a vision and then just kicking off with the momentum of that. So that's really cool.
Right.
Before I forget, I do want to ask, does Matt have like a bunch of Jordans in his collection? Is he like a sneakerhead like that?
Yes, aside from us wearing all of our leather shoes and boots, both of us love sneakers. So we love Jordans, we love Nikes, and I feel like that's really all that we wear other than our boots.
Not trying to promote another shoe company on here, but I had to, from Chicago. I don't know anything about fashion.
I mean, yes, we both love Jordans. So.
I was about to say, I don't know anything about shoes except for like certain pairs of Jordans, but that's awesome that you guys have this like shared passion that you guys can work together on. And obviously you're seeing the fruits of it. So you kind of described like how you got into the fashion industry, and, just even working in any kind of small business right now in this current climate is, kind of challenging, right? Especially with the pandemic. So how has that impacted you guys and maybe shifted how you operate normally?
For us, a lot of pivoting for sure. I feel like early on in Dallas, we were considered non-essential. So we had to close our shop for a couple of weeks. And we were looking for ways to get creative to continue operating since we were doing our own fulfillment and manufacturing a lot of our products in-house. So we have our shop and we make a lot of our accessories, MacBook cases, everything is handmade here. Whereas like the shoes we get from Mexico and it's shipped over, that was the easy part. But we were like, how are we going to function if our shop is closed like during the pandemic? So all that to say, we pivoted. I had the idea to start making masks, which allowed us to be considered essential. So we could sell and donate a lot of them when they were harder to find at the time. I would say like early on, we started doing it in April. And then we continued like our regular operations with leather goods. So it kind of killed two birds with one stone for us. So, I'm glad that we made the decision early on to start creating masks because we already had the machinery and all of the equipment. So I was like, why not do this when our community needed it? Because so many people, it was so hard to find at the time because no one was doing it like end of March, early April. Now come summer, everybody was creating it. Companies were starting to do it. So I'm glad we pivoted when we did.
Yeah.
Because in my
timing.
head, I'm like, I don't know what we would have done because we were not considered essential at the time.
Wow. That's an awesome idea, and like being early adopters to that. But then also you're doing something really great for your community, and just even think forward for that, right?
Absolutely.
That's really cool. And so you're obviously dealing with challenges and being an owner of a company in challenging circumstances. Can you kind of talk about just leadership and some of the lessons that you've learned maybe within this environment or just kind of through this journey?
For us, I think even before the pandemic, early on, we said we had to choose to be proactive than reactive, right? Especially in a small business, things are always changing. So you kind of have to have that mindset if you're going to go into this field or really in any field. If you're starting something and you're wanting to create your own business, you just have to have that mindset. While there is a certain element of reacting to what's happening, we still have to choose to proactively make moves and changes to put ourselves in a position to be successful rather than waiting around to see what's going to happen to us. I think you just have to have the mentality of, okay, things are probably going to change in 6 months. So how can we prepare if plan A doesn't work out? Like, what's plan B going to be? So I think we already had that mindset going into it because we talked to a bunch of people that were already in the fashion industry and starting a business. They're like, things aren't going to go like how you always planned it. So you just have to be able to be ready. Like, if a curveball hits, what are you going to do? Right. So we already kind of prepared for that right from the start. So once the pandemic hit, yes, it was scary. It was a year for everybody, but we were already kind of in that momentum and we were just like, hey, let's try to figure it out and get in front of this before it's too late.
That's a great piece of advice. I feel like even folks that we've talked to on this podcast before, especially if they own their own company or leading something, they are thinking a couple steps ahead, right? You can't just kind of wing it, right? Like if you're going to own and lead, you really have to like plan things out. So, folks come to us and like ask us all the time, like, oh, I want to be a leader. I'm thinking about this idea. I want to do something. And maybe it's like leading at church or at work or getting a promotion or even starting something new. Like, what do you think is that critical skill or characteristic for that leader to have?
I think it goes back to just what I said. Adaptability is huge, right? You can't stay married to one way of thinking or one way of doing things forever because things are bound to change. They always will, whether it's for better or for worse. Things change and you have to be flexible enough to adapt. Both Matt and I are reading this book from Adam Grant called Think Again. It's really just, shifting your mind and shifting your perspective of like, okay, I have this vision, I have this idea, but at the same time, you're trusting like your team or people around you, like, okay, that's a great idea, but you also have to look at, what it's going to look like a couple months from now. So you just always have to think through, hey, this might work right now, but 8 months from now, we have to probably come back to the drawing board and think again of what's actually going to be relevant. So whether it's positive or not, like, don't be afraid or too prideful to change. That's how you continue to grow, learn, and get uncomfortable. I think things are always changing quickly. So you have to be willing to go with the flow. There's opportunity all around us to be creative and think outside the box and embrace different perspectives. I think, yes, being a business owner, that helps you grow, but I think that just generally helps you grow as a person.
That's really great. And I'm glad that you mentioned that book because that's on my reading list, actually.
Oh my goodness, it's so good. We love him.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to read that. And that's so That's so important that we have to adapt. And like, I
Hmm.
think everybody, this can apply to everybody because I don't think half the workforce realized they were going to be working from home and learning how to
Right.
do Zoom meetings forever.
Right.
Um,
But then a lot of companies now are realizing you can work from home. Things that
yep.
you have to go into the office, 5 days a week. You don't have to have a million meetings. You can
Right.
just like do half of them on a Zoom call, and then you're getting a lot more work done
Oh,
without
yeah.
actually being in the office. And I always say, like, being in the office, you're always having meetings or doing something, and then you're actually like, I didn't even get my
Didn't
list
even
done.
work. That is
That I
the
wanted to.
that's like half of corporate America. I traveled
Right.
for work and I remember traveling for a meeting, like one hour meeting. I'm like, why did I fly here? And I lost 3 days of the week being at home. Didn't make any
Right.
sense.
Right.
No, that's great advice. I think we have to be adaptable. So like obviously even being adaptable in situations where it is challenging, that must be kind of stressful, right? Like
Hmm.
in those difficult moments, maybe personally for you, how do you stay focused? How do you like try to navigate through when it's a challenging environment or a kind of a problem that you have to solve? How do you navigate through some of those tough moments?
Um, for me, like, and for us in general, we put like a premium on excellence in controllable things, right?
Hmm.
So some things you can control and some things you can't. And the ones that we can't, we just have to make sure it's not going to take too much of our time, our energy, our focus, because what's the point if we can't control it in the moment? The best thing we can do is strive for excellence and improve what's right in front of us that we can directly impact. And I think we just need to know it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, like for us, we have learned over the years that what we can control, let's focus on it and how can we make it better. Yes, I feel like there are things that we wanted to. And for me, like, I always want plan A to win and like be
Right.
the best. But at the same time, I think now understanding like, hey, that's not always going to be the case when you're starting a business. It's much easier to not get into the feelings of like, okay, we couldn't control that situation and it just happened. But now what can we focus on with what we have and make it better?
That's great. And I feel like that's very biblical too, right? Like
Hmm.
who can add an hour to their day by worrying? And I think even just
Yeah.
having our faith like influence that. That's solid there. And I feel like not a lot of maybe secular business leaders or people who are starting their business, sometimes they freak out about like the little things, but
Hmm. No, yeah, I mean, I think it just causes frustration for no reason. And then you're worried and then you're putting yourself like in a dark place just for no reason. I think it's important to embrace your feelings, but you can't sit there, right? You can like, embrace it and you're like, okay, that didn't work out. That sucks. But at the same time, there's all these other things over here that's like waiting for your attention, and now you're going to be focusing on what can we do to make this part better. Like, yes, we focused on it, but now we're going to like do some things differently and actually make it the best.
no, that's good because I don't want it to make it sound like you should ignore your feelings and those
Right.
challenging circumstances.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, that's really great advice. And I think our faith kind of helps us with that, right? Like and
Yeah.
having our trust in the Lord to navigate us through those things. So can you talk a little bit about that? And like how has like your faith specifically helped you in your role as a leader?
For me, trust and remaining steadfast has been huge. God has been with us throughout this journey. We wouldn't be where we are today without him in any way possible. And I feel like entrepreneurship is much harder than people actually talk about in public. So, social media, documentaries, interviews, etc., you name it, typically only show the highlights, but there's a lot of difficult moments and I feel like unpredictable events that definitely shake your foundation. And I just can't imagine walking through this journey without my faith and if I didn't know who was looking out for us. So it's to be honest, I don't know how people do it without their
without
faith.
it. Right.
And because, like, for us, there's a lot of praying, there's a lot of trusting, and faith is just huge. And, we don't know where we would be without God by our side each moment of every day throughout this process. I know personally, I wouldn't have made it without him.
Yeah, yeah. It's strange to think about that, right? Like there's folks
Hmm.
who try to navigate this world without Christ. And like I think, as believers, it's almost like sometimes we take it for granted, but like how do people
Right.
actually do this
Yeah.
without the peace of God comforting us and
Yeah.
just trusting that he navigates? Yeah, that's a really good thought about that. And I'm sure you've met people along the way in the industry who are leaders who probably not, believers who are probably in the industry or whatnot. But is there things that you've noticed that separate like a Christian leader versus someone else or folks who aspire to be leaders without faith?
I think, despite the expectation, the most important factor is usually how they consider the people around them. So I would say, like, no matter if it's their immediate circle or those affected by their influence, it really just comes down to the community that they're leading in. So for us, like for me, the way a leader builds and empowers their team says everything about how you value people. And I feel like today, in both the non-Christian environment and even in the church, I feel like cloud chasing has eroded a lot of the moral fiber of leadership, even in the
Yep.
church, which is really sad to me. And I think because, especially with everything going on in the last couple of years, this should be a perfect moment for the church to really step up and shine.
Yeah, that's really great. And it's something I've been thinking about too, like this clout chasing, this like, hey, I need to have these many people following me and I just need to have this like, I don't know, influence. And at the end of the day, sometimes it's not about the numbers, it's about the people that we are
Mhm.
impacting, right?
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I just think you just have to be able to separate yourself from that and really focus on what's the most important thing that you're trying to accomplish. And it's not a popularity contest. It's
Yep.
not about how many likes that you have. I mean, people focus so much, even on social media, the algorithm changes on Instagram and all of
Yeah.
that. And while it's important, as a brand, it is important because you're trying to get yourself out there. At the same time, you just can't focus on, oh my goodness, how many people are liking my post, because it
Right.
goes way bigger than that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a minuscule value into that. And from a marketing standpoint, definitely. But yeah, sometimes it overtakes the purpose and the goal.
Right, right.
Um, I'm glad that you mentioned that. And, obviously that impacts our community where people have this perception of leadership and success. And I think maybe in that culture, like when we're, people are looking at Instagram or social media and they're seeing this like picture of fame and fortune. Um, and I think our culture glorifies that a little bit too, right? So
Yeah.
what advice would you give to the next gen who's like seeing you and like seeing, what you're doing and are encouraged by it, which I think they are. What advice would you give them if they want to kind of follow in your footsteps, so to speak?
Man, I would say, be the hardest working person in the room. I don't think you should let social media fool you, because that's only a glimpse of what's happening. Things are rarely just handed to you. I think luck and God's favor are absolutely a factor, but you still have to work hard for it and, earn it. You have to actually do the work to get to where you want to be. You can be in the right place at the right time, but if you aren't disciplined and prepared for it, you can still miss that moment. And to go back to your question on fame and fortune, like I just think in this generation, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. We just glorify it so much. And I would say just be very careful about that. I just think you have to have a great community around you, whether it be your friends, family, or whatever strong support system you have around you. I think humans in general aren't meant to be worshiped, which is why we continue seeing people that are in the limelight, like celebrities, slip into depression, anxiety, addiction, you name it, because I just don't think we are meant to be worshiped or put on this pedestal like we're a god of some sort. I think it's too heavy of a burden, and we were made to carry it. So if you're going to find any amount of success, you have to protect yourself and be surrounded with strong people that support you and love you enough to really point out your blind spots.
Yeah.
And, for us now, we're seeing like mental health is so important, but yet it's so ignored at the same time. And it's a real thing. I think we're getting to a point being more open, but we still have like a long way to go. We need to be able to normalize it. And I think we're making baby steps for it. But the more we glorify being perfect and having it all together, the more people shut down and ignore it. So I just think we just need to create safe environments for people to actually be themselves and accept them on where they're at in their life.
Yeah. I don't think our problems go away if you get a blue check mark next to your name, right? It's like,
right.
You get that? It's not like everything solves everything. But yeah, I'm so glad you even spotlighted mental health. It's funny. A lot of the conversations that we've been having, folks have been sharing that they are consistently getting help. And that's just a natural part of their everyday life. It's not like something's wrong. It's just like, no, I know I need help. I'm not perfect. And I'm glad we're making incremental steps towards that. Right.
Absolutely.
So this is a really great conversation. I think there's a lot of golden nuggets here that people need to hear. Honestly, it's like, this is perfect for this time. And I guess even the climate where people look at success in a certain way and aspire to do something. But I think we have to have that Christ-centered lens, and you guys are making a great impact on the community. So like, maybe we'll shift this a little bit to say, what can we do to support you as a community? How can we support you? How can folks listening to this kind of rally and move Marciante and company forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really just goes back to promotion and word of mouth. That's everything for an online business. I think recommendations and reviews are worth their weight in gold. So if you're in the market for anything close to like what we're doing and what we're making and selling, I would just say, please consider us. Like, leave a nice Google or Facebook review, because that does go a long way when people search for anything like leather related, whether it be shoes, accessories, MacBook cases. So word of mouth, telling your friends about us, it goes such a long way in building the brand and helping us have a larger footprint in the community. So I think the truth of the matter is, an up and coming brands, like, we can make cool products and great things for the community all day long, but the more people share about it and talk about it is what's going to make the difference.
No, and definitely check out the website. There's some really great products there. And I got to expand outside of my Jordan collection. So, Jackie, like, what's up next for you guys, and what can we kind of be on the lookout for both you and Matt?
We definitely have some exciting things coming up. We hope to have some new releases, like, by the end of this year, as we return like a little bit more of a normal routine and a retail schedule. So we're excited for the growth that we're seeing, and definitely excited for the collaborations we have coming up. I know that's kind of like a vague answer, but we have a lot more new products coming throughout this year. So I would just say, like, keep up with our social media and our websites as new releases come.
Awesome. No, I think that's definitely something that we should all be following you and kind of check out the website and support you guys. And I think, I appreciate you being on, Jackie. And like, one thing that we really want to make a focus of this podcast is spotlighting folks who are leaders, but not just like, hey, you have a business, jump on our podcast. It's intentional. The invite is intentional because we want folks who are leaders, but also, displaying an impact to their community from a Christ-centered lens. And like you guys are doing that. And that's kind of where we've seen that. So just want to encourage you that you guys are doing some really great work and it's noticed. And I hope our listeners out there kind of take notice of you because there's examples out there that can kind of suck people into the world in like a false sense of leadership and success. And I think you kind of explained that very clearly on like what we should be putting our trust in if we want to aspire to those things. So
yeah. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Jackie, we appreciate you being on. Best of luck to you. And we're looking forward to all the great things you're going to be doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Restoring Our City podcast. We really hope you enjoyed that episode with Jacqueline, and we encourage you to check them out. They're doing some really great work in their community and really exhibiting great leadership. So check them out. And if you find this content encouraging, we encourage you to share this and subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can watch the full episodes on YouTube as well, and engage with us on our social media channels. You can find all that info on our website at restoringourcity.org. Thanks again for listening.